Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. Today's video, we are going to talk about part 2 of the band. Who are we talking about? No, who are we talking about? I forgot what band. Who? Hello everybody, hope everybody's doing well here on a Sunday afternoon. And this is the part 2 of my deep dive on the great British rock band, The Who. One of my favorite rock bands of all time. And yeah, really getting to kind of their peak period, I would say, as a band. Part 1, I covered how they got together as a band, how they kind of got well known as a band, I guess, and their records from first 3 records I kind of covered. For the third one, The Who Sell Out came out, 67, 68. So now we're getting to their 4th album, and we're getting to the very end of the 60s period for them, and a very popular period, I would say, for the band. Because in 1969, they come out with their 4th album, which is a very, I would say, one of the most ambitious albums they've ever done, and that is Tommy. This is a double album. This is a rock opera. Pete Townshend's kind of his idea of coming up with this kind of big concept idea of a story, and it has, we call it interludes and beginnings and, instrumentals, reprises, all the stuff that you would get out of a musical. In fact, The Who, Tommy was made to a movie, in fact, really terrible movie. It made my top 10 or my 10 worst movies list. And it's also a musical on, I want to say Broadway right now. You can go see this. They revived it from Broadway, I think, at the moment. So it's getting kind of revival right now. And you can definitely get it from the album. Listening to it definitely definitely suits a good musical. Not a great story, but the music is absolutely amazing. The album did very well. Went number 2 in the UK and number 7 in the US. And the big hit was Pinball Wizard, which was one of my favorite Who songs, and really the biggest radio hit off the album. If you don't know Tommy is a story about a kid named Tommy who's I get a little confused by the beginning, but I think the dad goes off to war or something like that, and then the mom gets together with another guy. And then the dad comes back from war and kills that guy to get back with the wife. And Tommy sees this, and they tell him, you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything, you don't know what happened. And it traumatizes him to where he's now can't see, can't hear, and he can't speak. He's deaf, dumb, and blind, they call him. Anyways, and it's a psychological thing. He really can see and hear and talk, but the psychological damage that situation did. Anyways, and then he grows up being bullied by a cousin. He gets molested by his uncle. Horrible stuff happened to this guy. And the parents don't know what to do with him. They're trying to figure out how to get him out of this, psychological problem. And one of the things is he goes and plays pinball, and he's a good pinball player, which doesn't make sense, because how can you play pinball if you can't see, hear, what's going on, especially seeing the pinball, how can you be, and and that's the whole song, Pinball Wizards. This other, it's sung through another person who was like the best pinball player, and then he's like, and it says in the song, I give my title over to Tommy. It says, how does he know what he's doing? He plays by sense of smell and all this stuff. Anyway, so that kind of proves that he can see and hear and all this, that he's just pretending not to be, I guess, and all that. Anyways, and then finally he does get out of it. They finally, there's a mirror that he always stares at, and there's a song about they smash the mirror, and then all of a sudden he's free. He can speak and talk and all this like that. And because of this miraculous event, he gets a cult following. People are following him. like a religious cult, and he's speaking at these rallies and kind of starts his own cult kind of thing. And we get one of the most probably famous songs from the album is the We're Not Gonna Take It, I think, at the end. And at the end, the crowd eventually rejects him anyways. And there's this moment where he says, you know, see me, feel me, touch me, or something like that. It's kind of a part that you've probably heard the most out of this album, that he's done on stage quite a bit. The Who have done, I think they've done this whole album, in fact, in total on stage. And they did it at Woodstock, in fact. And it's kind of a famous part of their performance in Woodstock. I think it's him doing that, you know, see me, touch me, feel me, and all this. It's another highlight of the album. But overall, it's a wonderfully, I guess, it's like a rock musical, basically. And it's really great. The music is Who. It's great. The instrumentation, the vocal work of not Tommy, but of Roger Daltrey as Tommy. Roger Daltrey basically becomes Tommy, which is kind of interesting. He takes up that, and he plays Tommy in the movie too. So he does really take on that character, which is very, very interesting. And he does such an amazing job throughout the album. And yeah, it's actually the first album I ever listened to. Actually, when I first got introduced to the Who, my dad showed me this album, Tommy, which is kind of a weird album to start with. I wouldn't recommend starting with Tommy, but I remember being blown away because I never heard of a rock opera before, and I was like, what is this concept of rock opera? And like, it's like a musical, but it's a rock and roll band, and I loved the idea, and I thought it was a great album. Really introduced me to the Who, and I went on to listen to some other albums anyways. But I think definitely, if you want to get into the Who, this is definitely one you have to listen to. It's one of their groundbreaking albums, and definitely one of the most groundbreaking rock operas of all time. In my opinion, my favorite like rock opera, rock musical that's ever been made. So yeah, definitely one to check out, one of their biggest, and really solidified, I think, Townshend is one of the great songwriters and geniuses when it comes to this stuff. As I mentioned, they went to Woodstock in 1969. Woodstock happened. They had a great performance there that you can see on their documentary. They also went to the Isle of Wight, and they had a famous, that you can look on YouTube. They have a really great live concert footage of them there. Like I said, this is like them becoming one of the, really this, I feel like by this album, really made them one of the top groups at the time. The Beatles were starting to wind down, of course. We're getting to the end of the Beatles, so Beatles are still the top dog, I would say. Then Led Zeppelin starts in 1969. Led Zeppelin's going to start their reign kind of around this time. But I think you have to put Who right there as like one of the top dogs in rock and roll at that time with this album, I think. Well, they don't stop there. They go from one great album to a really, really great album, in my opinion. In 1971, they come out with their fifth album, which is Who's Next, which you probably have heard anything about the Who. You probably heard this album. Probably the most well-known, best album. Probably going to top most rankings of their discography for good reason. It has some of their biggest songs on it. And it actually started out as another rock opera that Townshend really loved doing these rock operas, evidently, and was set to do another one called Lifehouse, was going to be the name of it. But for whatever reason, it never materialized. And so they took some of these songs and they just put together for this album, Who's Next. And I've heard there's some, you know, like for Baba O'Reilly, that's set in the story of the, you know, kids in the wasteland, whatever, and won't get fooled again. There's some kind of storyline there. I don't really pay much attention to it. To me, they're just great rock songs. And even Behind Blue Eyes is supposed to be the song of, I think, the villain or something of the rock opera. So somehow they fit together in a sense. You can almost make a rock opera after it, but all you gotta know is it's one of the greatest rock albums of all time. It was number 6. I recently did my 6th favorite album of all time, and Who's Next was my 6th favorite album of all time. So needless to say, I absolutely love this album. It's my favorite Who album by far. It's absolutely amazing. It went number 1 in the UK and number 4 in the US, so it did very well charting wise and record wise. It sold lots. It's probably the best-selling album, like I said. And what a great use of the synthesizer. This is Townshend really going in on the synthesizer. You don't really hear that on any other album until this point. And he does it big time. And Baba O'Reilly has a great synth intro that makes that kind of a famous, unique song. And then also there's a synth solo in Won't Get Fooled Again as well that is absolutely incredible. So it was, to me, one of the first uses of synthesizer in rock music. And that becomes very popular through the 70s and the 80s. Bands started using synth a lot more. I don't want to say they're like the first to do it or they're the grandfathers of it, but I feel like they definitely made a big part of making synth a big deal at the time. But like I said, the two probably biggest songs off here is Baba O'Reilly, the opener, which is a weird title because it should be called Teenage Wasteland because that's the chorus. But like I said, look at any list of the Who songs, this has got to be in the top 5 probably, if not top 10. I mean, definitely top 10, probably top 5 at least. Me, Adam from What the Gym, and Nick from Townsend 505 did our 5, we ranked our 5 top Who songs. I believe I was on Nick's channel maybe. And all 3 of us had Baba O'Reilly on our list. So yeah, it's one of those must, songs, or one that you have to say is one of the greatest. Their closer, Won't Get Fooled Again. I mean, what a great opener closer. Baba O'Reilly to open it. Won't Get Fooled Again, close it. Won't Get Fooled Again is my favorite Who song. I said that when we did our ranking recently. It's absolutely amazing rock song. And I love that, we all agree, I think, when we talked about it in our group, that synth solo, and then with the drums coming in, building up to that scream. It's an incredible scream that Roger Daughtry, like, wow, I didn't know he was capable of such a great scream, but he's the best. It's the best scream in rock history when he comes in with that, yeah, boom, boom, and it goes back into the Won't Get Fooled Again chorus. Absolutely incredible. The instrumentation is absolutely incredible in that song. It's a fairly long song, but man, I love it every time I listen to it, and that's what makes it such an amazing album. But Behind Blue Eyes, I don't know if that was a big hit. It was, I think, a little bit of a hit. I think that was on the radio as well. But Bargain's an amazing rock song off of here. Song Is Over and Getting Tuned are just really great, like almost ballads, which they don't do much ballads. And that was great when they can do rock and then they do a couple ballads here. It's just a complete album. It's a must listen to. Who's Next? So then there's next album coming in 1973, album I don't have, and that is their 6th studio album called Quadrophenia, which went number 2 in the UK and the US. So number 2 in both, did very, very well. It's considered one of their great albums as well. And it's another double album. It's a rock opera. It's their second, only like 2 rock operas that they did really. And so it, again, like Tommy, did very, very well, the whole concept. I don't know what to say about it, except like I'm not a fan of Quadrophenia, but I know a lot of people love Quadrophenia. That's number 1 on some people's lists. It's definitely one you probably need to listen to because it's so big and famous. Me personally, I prefer Tommy over Quadrophenia. I think Quadrophenia's a little boring. There's not a lot of memorable songs, except for the last one. I'd say the only hit song on the album's their closer, which is Love Reign Over Me, which definitely is a must listen. Great vocal work from Daughtry, and the end, the drumming from Keith Moon is just some of the best drumming you'll ever hear. Just really fast-paced drumming, and in fact, watch the video of that song. Is really fun to watch. But yeah, Quadrophenia, another successful rock opera for the Who. Well, the tour they did after this was a total disaster, unfortunately. After Quadrophenia, Daughtry knocked Townsend out with a microphone. Daughtry loved to, swing the microphone, like really big swings, and put it up in the air, and he accidentally swung it and hit Townsend and like knocked him out, unfortunately. The big problem is Moon. Keith Moon's, his alcohol and drug addiction has definitely gone down a really bad, dark moment where he's really hurting his performance as a drummer. He's gone kind of overboard with it. They all had problems. I mean, most rock musicians have drug and alcohol problems, but it's always bad when it hurts your performance anyways. And so Moon was passing out during concerts due to that, and they would have to get someone from the audience, I think, to come try to complete the which I don't know how that works, but they had to try to find someone in the audience who could play drums, I guess, and obviously no one could come out in the audience and play like Keith Moon, but I guess play just enough to keep a beat. I guess they can continue the concert or whatever. They just have to, cancel the concert, which you never want to do as a musician. That'd give a bad reputation. People won't come to your concerts at that point. But I mean, very irresponsible of Keith Moon to take it to such a level that he couldn't even finish concerts. And I've seen this a couple times with other bands, that someone gets this far gone. It's very unfortunate. He was definitely going down a very dark and bad path, more than anybody else in the band, I guess you can say. Also, the band they arrested for property damage. They love to trash hotels and stuff like that, like a lot of rock bands do. And so they were in a lot of legal trouble as well. So it was just, that tour was just, I guess, pretty bad. And I don't know if they'd ever do a tour again like that. In fact, I think that was maybe their last tour that they did was after that. And yeah, like I said, Keith Moon was getting to a bad place. And I read in Pete Townshend's, book, it's like they knew he was going downhill, but there was nothing they felt like they could do to stop it. Like I think Townsend maybe regrets that he wasn't able to stop it, before it got too far. But they soldiered on, and in 1978, so there's a bit of a period here between 73 and 78, so a 5-year period here before they made their next album. And it was a pretty good wait, though, because they come out with one of my favorite albums of theirs, and that is Who Are You? Here, I heard a lot of Keith Moon is sitting on a chair, they say because he had a big beer gut or something like that. So he's trying to cover up his beer gut or something like that. That's why he's kind of covering it up, is what I've heard. And I've even heard some people say that his drumming was getting worse at this point, and he was not as good of a drummer as he used to be. I mean, the drumming still sounds pretty good on the album, so I don't hear anything too bad. But I think from what I've heard from other people, it was definitely going downhill as a musician, unfortunately, because of his drug addiction and all that. But still considered one of their best albums, I think, and still a must listen to. It went number 6 in the UK and number 2 in the US, so still a top 10, top 5 almost for both. But the band did not tour. They could not go on because Moon was just not doing good enough as a drummer to keep going, and they didn't want to replace him. So they decided not to tour, unfortunately, which is unfortunate. A really great album. In fact, this is my second favorite Who album after Who's Next. It's an amazing rock album. Unfortunately, really their last great rock album. But they went out kind of with a bang with this one. In fact, if it was up to me, I think they should have quit after this album, and Who would have quit on a really high run, similar to Led Zeppelin, who kind of quit after 8 albums after their drummer died. This is their 8th album. It would have been a great closer to their history, but the big one is their closer, Who Are You, is absolutely amazing. Another amazing epic song with the Who Are You, who, so catchy. Great use of synthesizer again, but the whole album, there's like not a bad song on here, and side 2 is like one of the greatest side 2s I've ever heard. And there's songs you probably never heard of, but Trick of the Light, Guitar and Pen, Love Is Coming Down, and then Who Are You? I mean, all 4 songs are like the best songs on the album, and are by themselves some of their best rock music that they've come up with, especially Guitar and Pen. If you haven't heard Guitar and Pen, I was blown away because I never heard of Guitar and Pen until recently when I went through the discography this last year, and I got to Guitar and Pen. I was like, this is like one of their best songs. I don't know why this was not a hit song on the radio. It could have been. It was so amazing. But yeah, so that was their 8th album. Unfortunately, and this came out in 78. Unfortunately, September 6, 1978, Keith Moon would die from a drug overdose. Like I said, he was just going down a really dark path. And, they could, one of these things where I don't know if they did intervention with him. Maybe they could have, but it's like when someone, doesn't try to help themselves, it's so hard to try to get them. It's impossible to kind of get them out of these drug addictions and stuff like that. And that was one where Keith Moon never, tried to get out of it, it seems like, and eventually did him in, unfortunately, amongst so many great rock musicians. Last time I talked about Rolling Stones, and I had to talk about Jones, also also dying tragically young, kind of. And here we got another one with Keith Moon. And then whenever I talk about Led Zeppelin, probably pretty soon, I'm going to talk about another rocker. And Jimi Hendrix is another one I'm going to be doing a deep dive on. It's like, man, so many of these people dying too soon because of drugs. It's just very sad. And such a huge, to me, Moon is such an integral part of the Who. It's hard for me to think of the Who being the Who without any one of those members. And Keith Moon, definitely, his drumming is very unique, I think. And to me, he's one of the top 2 favorite drummers. I think with John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, I'd say. It's hard to say which one's better. They're both just absolutely amazing. But just how, and watching him play is so fun too. His facial expressions, the way he moves around the drum kit, like I said before, and just he's so fast. His drumming is just so fast, so powerful. He's all over the place, and it feels like something you just can't teach. He's just had the natural ability to be a great drummer and be so entertaining while he does anyway. So definitely a huge loss there for Keith Moon. But the Who, actually, they didn't quit as a band. They kept going, kind of surprisingly to me. But they had a member of the Small Faces, another British rock band. It's not as well known. They had a drummer named Kenny Jones, and they had Kenny Jones join them on the next 2 albums that they did in the 80s period. And it's funny, I listened to the Small Faces, I forget, it's called like something Nuts Gone Flake. Anyways, it's Ogden's Nut Gun Flake is the name of it. It's a weird name for an album. It's a pretty strange album too. Came out in the late 60s, I believe, with Small Faces. And I listened to it because my friend Nick is a big fan of the album. And we listened to it, and we did actually a whole on Scott's Sound Lab Studios channel. This was maybe a year ago, I don't know. We did a video on the album, and I said the best thing about the album is the drumming. And I said the drummer for Small Faces reminds me of Keith Moon, and that's before I knew that he played with the Who after Keith Moon died. And so I was like, oh, so I was definitely on the right, path when I said that. When Nick told me, oh, Kenny Jones played with the Who after that, I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, that makes total sense, because the person that reminds me most of Keith Moon was this guy, Kenny Jones. I thought was absolutely amazing drummer for the Small Faces. So, so pretty good replacement. I mean, it feels like he never replaced Keith Moon, but overall, Kenny Jones does a really good job in the next 2 albums, and you feel like you have a little bit of Keith Moon there with him, at least. But yeah, they did these 2 albums in the 80s, one called Face Dances and one called It's Hard. Definitely 2 of their least successful albums that they made up to this point, and least known albums. Didn't really provide any big hits. To be honest, this Face Dances, I think, is actually a decent album. I think it has some good stuff there, and the musicianship is still really great there. The vocals, everything. It still feels like the Who. They haven't totally lost it, but I think losing Keith Moon is just like, nobody really talks about the album. It's Hard is one of my least favorite Who albums. I think it's probably my least favorite, actually. I think it's at the very bottom of my list of Who albums. I don't know, it just didn't capture the magic of the Who at that point. And it started feeling more, it's funny when you start in the 60s, you got that 60s sound. 70s, they were able to, I mean, the Who were great at starting on that British Invasion 60s, early 60s, whatever sound, and blues rock sound, and then evolving into more of the psychedelic sound in the late 60s into the 70s. They did a great job evolving with the times, I feel like. And then it didn't work for me in the 80s. I feel like trying to sound like the 80s, it felt like, the Who didn't belong in the 80s. It feels like, it's one of those things where sometimes bands feel like they belong to a certain decade, and then after they go too far, they just overcome their welcome, I guess, in a sense. And I feel like the Who did that. I feel like the Who is like a 60s, 70s band. And then when they gone beyond that, it was like they didn't feel like they fit as much anymore. And so, yeah, but like I said, neither album did very well chart-wise or sales-wise, unfortunately. So definitely as a band, we're kind of going on the downtrend, and other bands were overtaking them as the great bands of that time period, unfortunately. And so Townshend was coming very depressed after this, 2 really bad selling albums for The Who. and he was having a huge drug addiction himself with heroin. And so he was not in a good place either. Townsend wasn't. And so in 1983, after the It's Hard album, he quit the band basically. And that kind of became the end of The Who at that moment when Townsend quit, I guess, and the rest of the members, they all kind of went their own way, I guess. Townsend did go and do some solo albums. I think Entwistle had some solo albums as well. I haven't heard any of their solo stuff, but it's kind of interesting. And I don't know if Daughtry did any solo stuff. He might have. I wouldn't be surprised. So they all did kind of their solo stuff. None of them had any big solo hits or solo albums necessarily, but that's kind of the way they went. They did get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990. So one of the pretty early on inductees, I would say, of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Very deserving, of course. And I think they would come together once in a while to do reunion tours or something, or do reunion shows and so forth. What really revived them, though, interesting enough, was in 2001, after the 9/11 happened, and we had this big 9/11, and I remember watching this on TV, of course, the 9/11 concert. It was called the Concert for New York. And, of course, it's very emotional and the audience was all like first responders, firefighters and policemen that were there during 9/11. Of course, it's the most emotional moment as an American, what happened in 9/11. And so that concert was, a very emotional concert. And they had so many great artists come through and play songs. It was really wonderful. And the highlight of the whole concert was The Who, which was, Daughtry, Entwistle, and Townsend. And I don't know who the drummer was for them, but they came out and, man, everybody was the crowd was electric for The Who. And I thought they gave the best performance. I remember watching on TV, and I'm like, 18 years old or something, and just going, wow, The Who still have it somehow. After all these years, they came and they still have this, Townsend with his windmills, Daughtry with his mic swinging. It's like, man, it's still so fun to watch them play live anyway. So I feel like that kind of revived them, because I think everybody felt like they had a great concert and they were the best part of the concert. And so they would start doing more concerts together. In fact, I remember seeing something about Townsend saying that Entwistle was always in debt. Like, Entwistle was a huge spender. He had a huge estate and probably expensive cars and all this. And he would get in money trouble, and he would talk to Daughtry and Townsend and say, hey, let's do a tour because I need some money. And so Townsend said, yeah, they would a lot of times go on tour just to help Entwistle out, because they want to help him out and get him some money anyway. So they were really hitting it on the road again and touring anyways. So it wasn't long after this big concert in New York that they were going on tour. And in June 27, 2002, Entwistle would die in his hotel room, heart attack after cocaine. So, which is, I remember, and here they're probably in their, 50s or 60s at this point. And I remember that happening. It was a pretty big shock because they were on tour and everything. And all of a sudden, Entwistle, who's kind of older, dies basically from taking cocaine and having a heart attack. And you think, wow, he evidently had a big cocaine problem, and I had no idea. And it's weird because Entwistle was the quiet one, it felt like. He didn't really talk much. When he played, he just kind of stood there. Like, he wasn't as wild and crazy looking as the other group people. He's most famous for the skeleton costume, playing the bass, I think. I most think about Entwistle. Obviously, he was, I would say, the greatest, I think, in my opinion, the greatest bass player to ever play. I mean, the way he played that instrument was just groundbreaking and influential to all other bass players afterwards in the rock music. So, I mean, what a huge blow to lose Entwistle. And tragically that he had to, it wasn't natural causes necessarily. It's because him taking too much cocaine in a hotel room. So he was definitely living that rock and roll lifestyle even into his, 50s or 60s at that point. I guess it never totally leaves you. You never grow out of it anyway. So, but another sad loss for them. So they lost two members at that point. Daughtry and Townsend are still alive today. And they're probably getting up to 80 or something like that by this point. So, and I think they've still done concerts, just the two of them. They've got two people to, I think they even got maybe Ringo's son to drum for them or something like that, if I remember right. And they even made 2 more albums, which I was surprised to learn this. I assumed they stopped after It's Hard. I was like, what? Because I was alive when the 2 albums came out. I guess I wasn't paying attention to. I wasn't hyped up to get a new Who album at that time. I guess I wasn't paying attention, but they did come out with an album called Endless Wire in 2006, and an album called The Who, just a self-titled album, came out in 2019, and that's their last album. And 5 years ago, I don't know if they'll ever do another album. I would assume that's their last album. In 2019, it was only 5 years ago they came out with an album. Obviously, they're not going to be as well. It's hard to, when you have an album that doesn't have Keith Moon or John Entwistle in it, it's a little hard to accept it as a Who album, I think, by most Who fans. But it's considered part of their discography, a part of them. They still have Townsend and Daughtry doing everything, probably writing the music and all that. And to be honest, they're not bad albums. In fact, Endless Wire, I think, is actually a pretty good album. I was kind of shocked. I just figured that no way they're going to make a good album. I said the same thing about Rolling Stones and Hackney Diamonds. Like, no way they're going to make a new album that's going to be great. And it's like, oh, never mind. They still have it. But Endless Wire, I think, start pretty darn good. The Who is a decent album as well. Not as bad as you would think, but definitely not going to be considered one of their great albums. I feel like their peak period really ended with Who Are You in 1978, unfortunately. But still, it's great to see them out there. Like I said, I saw Townsend on The Tonight Show on Jimmy Fallon playing Pinball Wizard with the cast of the Broadway musical Tommy. And so he's still out there, still playing. So that was great to see. Daughtry you see every once in a while, doing stuff. So it's good to see they're still out there. But yeah, overall, they made 12 albums, starting from 1965 all the way to 2019. So spanned many decades. Over 100 million records sold. I mean, definitely one of the big selling rock bands of that period. And they're very groundbreaking in a couple ways. I think the rock opera, they definitely made that a popular genre. I read that Marshall stack amplifiers was a big deal that they started. Large public address systems was a big thing that they kind of popularized. And also the use of the synthesizer. Like I said, I think they're very influential in synthesizer music in rock music. So, I mean, really one of the most groundbreaking bands. Also, their ability to entertain on stage and the breaking of the instruments was very unique to them. So, yeah, one of the most influential rock bands of all time, I have to say. And one of my favorite is The Who. Like I said, definitely check out My Generation. The first album, I think, is very good. The Who Sell Out is a very interesting album. I think you should check out. To me, the top 3 is Tommy. You definitely got to check out. Who's Next is one of the greatest of all time. And Who Are You, I think you definitely need to check out. Like, I would say definitely check out those 5 albums, and then you can check the other ones after that. But lots of good stuff there. Some of my favorite albums. But yeah, that's my deep dive on The Who, my part 2, and the finishing of this album, this great band. And I'll be doing a top 10 favorite Who songs. I know Nick's going to join me for that, like he did for the Rolling Stones. So look forward to doing that soon. And just, yeah, comment. What do you think about any more comments about The Who? And what's your favorite song or album? Love to read the comments. Love to read any comment, and I appreciate it. And just want to thank anybody who watched this video. Thank you for liking it. And just thank you. Big thanks to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I just appreciate all of you and hope you have a good day.